WHOOBAZOO, that's Whoobazoo.com. Enter website.
Drivers, start your engines!
Hit the pace car! What for? Because you hit every other damn thing out there, I want you to be perfect!
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. It's him. He talks to me.
Well, I wanna be a race car driver. Pretty girls eating from my hand, yeah. Wanna live a life of fun and danger. No sweating working for the midnight ride.
Hey, race fans, welcome to the Whoobazoo Radio Network and welcome to the Drafting the Circus program. My name is Frank Santoroski. I'll be your host for the next hour as we talk about everything racing. Joining me in the studio tonight, I've got Luis Torres and Richard Youden. Guys, how we doing?
Good, thank you.
Pretty well. Busy.
Busy. All right. So NASCAR guys are at Daytona again for the second weekend in a row. On the road course. And again, we've got two NASCAR races in, 2 Cup races in, 2 first-time winners. The last time that happened, I believe, was 1950. But it's Christopher Bell coming through with the win this time. And Louise Bell is a guy that you and I have been, and Richard, we've been talking about for a couple of years as having genuine talent. And I think he could have made the jump in the Cup a year ago. But let's talk about this race because it wasn't an easy win for Bell. But there were some high drama here and there and everywhere, huh?
That certainly was. As far as Bell, as his second race with Joe Gibbs racing on the Cup side. He spent the previous year with Levine Family Racing before that shut down. But Bell has shown strong pace already this season. He just literally wasted no time. And if it wasn't for Chase Elliott, Kurt Busch having a little problems, and Joey Logano finding a way to maintain a race lead, his life depended on it. Sure, Daytona at the 500 was incidental. The other one is just Christopher Bell just outran him. But if it wasn't for that, Bell was still going to be a strong contender, a strong car. But a lot of things fell into Bell's lap, but he really earned that effort with that win. Because if it wasn't for certain circumstances, he would have probably had a top 5 day. But he made most of everybody's misfortunes, like Elliott and Kurt Busch and let's talk Brad Keselowski as well. He had an all right showing, but he just had so many issues left and right that he was really not in contention. But yeah, it's a huge deal for them. It caps off a dream weekend for JGR with the first-time winners. Obviously, at Xfinity, you had Ty Gibbs winning in his national touring debut, and then with Ty in his 38th start. But yeah, we've always known this from Bell. Was I expecting him to win this early? Probably not. I wasn't really expecting much to see first-time winners this year, but Bell and Reddick and Bubba Wallace will probably be the 3 that will come close, but I felt like 2022 would have been more realistic. But Bell just wasted no time. He just won right out of the gate. Simple as that.
Yeah, and so we're talking now. We've got 2 guys that ordinarily you wouldn't consider playoff contenders already locked into the playoffs. So that means, there's only 14 spots left because it's pretty obvious that both Michael McDowell and Christopher Bell will finish top 30 in points, barring any weird circumstances that happen through the year because they're both with relatively strong teams that are generally within that top 30. So this makes it tougher on some of the other kind of, fringe guys that just squeak in that maybe don't win a race or maybe only win one when there's more winners. So, this is like an early bubble already. For guys like fringe guys like, say, Amarola or even like a Ryan Newman. What do you think, Richard?
Yeah, I think it sort of highlights the strengths and the weaknesses of the playoff scene and how they determine the sort of top 16 there. And yeah, there'll be some guys who typically sort of, as you say, place in the top 15 week in, week out, and come sort of August, September, they suddenly find themselves in a playoff berth, and it's going to be a lot harder for them to do that this year. So it may make them push a little bit harder and cause a few upsets. Some guys that you don't expect to win races, you may see more and more of this throughout the year. But No, I think it's good. It freshens up the sport a little bit. It creates a few new names in there. The only sort of downside of it, and this is no disrespect to the two drivers here, I'd probably go more McDowell than Christopher Bell, because I think Bell would have a chance. But you hate having the guys in the first round of the playoffs that are like, yeah, these are the guys that are going to get out in the first three races there. And so you hope that's not the case, but it does almost make those first three a bit of like a dead rubber sort of thing, and just thinning the field out a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Now, Richard, while I've got you talking, I was reading an article that said that perhaps the amount of road courses they have this year is more of a strain on a NASCAR team's resources. Now, I know you have worked within NASCAR teams and whatnot. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think additional road course races puts a strain on the resources, or is it just business as usual?
I think it will do, because historically, certain teams and the places I've worked at, we knew that the drivers that we had in our stable weren't exactly, road course ringers, to put it mildly. And we would use road course chassis that were 3 or 4 years old, quite readily. And we'd give them a new, we'd powder coat dip them and, put a body on and, hey, try and bring it back in one piece because we've got to use it at the next road course race. And it's not that case anymore. You've gone from two road courses when I started to, how many is it now? 5 or 6?
I think it's 7. If you count the Clash.
Of course, yeah. So yeah, it will put more resources on, because you are going to have to probably build more road course chassis. And of course, in the future, when they go to the universal chassis, that'll change things a lot in the next couple of years there. But at the moment, yeah, it probably does create more work for them, and people will sit there and think, well, how does the chassis vary between a road course and a sort of a super speedway or a short track car? It's mainly sort of the suspension geometry and the suspension mounts. Obviously, on a road course, you've got to turn. That sounds very simplistic, I know. You got to turn in both directions, but the suspension has to be compliant in both orientation. You're not trying to shift all of your weight to the left-hand side of the car. You're going to have ballast rails on the right-hand side. Road courses, you really do need a nice, even balance. Now, neither the Roval at Charlotte or Daytona were used when I was involved in the sport, but it would be interesting to look at like the vehicle dynamics of running those road course circuits where you do run a large amount of the lap on the oval. Maybe they're not quite as road course centric as a Sonoma or a Watkins Glen or a Coda would be.
Yeah, and we've got the Indianapolis Roval on there as well.
Yeah,
which uses a large portion of that oval.
Yeah. Now, actually, Indianapolis was an interesting one, because that was another track that you would have a slightly different geometry, because it's 4 straights and 4 corners. So your car dynamics would be a little bit different. As you came off each corner, you wouldn't. If you take like a normal D-shaped oval, like a Charlotte or an Atlanta or somewhere like that, you actually sort of blend the exit of turn 4 into turn 1 into the tri-oval area. Then the exit from turn 2 onto the backstretch would be a little bit different. But you take Indianapolis, you've got, corner straight. So your dynamic of how you'd set the car up would be slightly different. But I imagine that going to somewhere like these Rovals, as they like to call them, the car would be set up a little bit more of a conventional oval car, should we say, than you would a conventional road course, because you look at, going back to the race at the weekend, who was it? Martin Truex Jr., I think it was, coming off turn 6, which was the exit of the infield onto the entrance of turn 1 of the Daytona oval course. He was great coming off that corner, had huge amounts of grip, huge amounts of drive. And then when he was on the backstretch, people were just blast straight past him. Probably that was a gear ratio thing. His ratios were set, but maybe not, because I think NASCAR used to mandate fourth gear, which is the top gear in a NASCAR Cup car, to be a 1-to-1 ratio. So everybody should have the same top ratio. So maybe it was a vehicle dynamics thing about how they got that grip down and how they utilized that power. But it was interesting to see, different performance in cars at different parts of the track.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, interesting that you bring that up, because, as I sit here and think about, how to set up the car, you've got to figure that the Roval, or these Roval type courses, infield road courses, it's a totally different animal than, say, a Watkins Glen or a Mid-Ohio or a Road America or a Sonoma that has plenty of elevation changes and really tight corners, because these Rovals are generally pretty flat, and other than when they get on the banking for the oval there. So it's definitely challenging for the engineers, and I imagine they've got to have a lot of different things in their toolbox this year.
Yep. And the simulator, it all goes back to, as you get less and less testing, especially pre-race testing, no qualifying, no practice, as we've seen in the past. It puts an emphasis on the tools that the teams have available, the simulation tools, the actual driver in the loop simulator that they've been talking. I heard them talking about over the weekend. It really puts an emphasis on those tools. And, we talked about it last year, and I think it's quite telling, some of the comments, and I may be completely wrong and doing people a complete disservice here, but, it's quite noticeable that Kyle Busch asked for some personnel changes within his team. And they weren't approved, they weren't agreed upon with his crew chief, and that ended up to the split of the crew chief. And I was saying last year, maybe because Kyle Busch was struggling without practice, without qualifying, maybe that highlighted a weakness in their simulation tool. And maybe, again, I'm not, trying to diminish anybody's work by any stretch of the imagination at Joe Gibbs Racing, but maybe it was, maybe that's an area that Kyle's, thought could need to be improved, was their simulation and their race engineering tools, and the crew chief didn't agree. Putting 2 and 2 there together and making 7 or something, but just how I see it.
Yeah, and of course Adam Stevens wasted no time. That's Bell's crew chief now, and huge weight off his shoulders, because Kyle and Adam were there since from 2015 to 2020. It was the second longest driver crew chief combination behind Harvick and Rodney Childers. But that's no longer the case.
Yeah, and to your point, I think a lot of folks are saying that Kyle Busch is asking for changes that backfired on him, and it's hard to disagree with the results on the track. I mean, here's a guy who was a prolific winner in the sport and a threat week in and week out, who literally ended up with one win last.
He was already out of the playoffs at the time when he won.
Yeah, he was already out of the playoffs, and so it was just goal for wins.
Really but I think that certainly, they struggled more than anybody last year with this no practice, and it's interesting, looking at the greater demands that are going to be placed on the vehicle engineering side of things. How they'll react and how they'll grow that side of the sport, because it's the cheapest, relatively cheap way of obtaining performance out of a vehicle. You're not spending the money going to tests, going to tracks, and doing private testing or NASCAR approved tire testing, whatever it may be, because that's not cheap. So to have supercomputers and simulation models and even driver in the loop simulators, it's far more cost effective. I mean, you look at what you have in Formula One now, you'll have each team has a driver in the loop simulator, which probably costs the same amount as an average NASCAR team's budget just for this one tool. And they'll have world-class drivers. Mercedes have Anthony Davidson, for example, and the like. They'll have world-class drivers in their simulator on a race weekend going through different scenarios. Now, NASCAR's not at that stage. I don't know of any team that actually has their own simulator at the moment. I know the manufacturers have one each. GM have one. Ford, I think Ford and Toyota will probably both have one. And I know there's a couple of independent ones within the US that some teams use. But that's certainly an area that's going to be growing over the next 5 to 10 years as teams become more and more budget conscious.
Certainly. So before we, turn our whole show over to technical talk, Louise,
what's wrong with that?
Huh? Nothing. I love it. I love it, but we have to have a little, variety is the spice of life. So, and we need to mention that there was a truck race out there at Daytona as well. They ran primarily in the rain. So Louise.
Speaking of rain, let's talk before we jump to trucks. Yeah, they need to do well. Actually, it correlates with it. They need to sort something out to where let the drivers decide and the teams decide what they want to do. Don't put a 100%. Caution. Don't put a caution. Now, I understand it's in the rule book, but don't put a caution. It's not going to work out if it's just only raining on one bit of the race. Like, just let the stuff unfold.
Yeah, terrible decision. There is an art of, was it somebody wrote a book called The Art of Racing in the Rain or something, or was it a movie, one of the two?
Both.
It's a book and a movie, and it had very little to do with racing. It was about a dog.
Yeah.
But
the concept is true. There is an art to it, and don't take that away from the drivers. There'll be some drivers that are far more adept to driving on slick tires in the rain than others, and if you've got a skill set, let them use it. Don't throw a caution. Let them make a damn decision. That annoys me, that rule. It really does.
Yeah, really. Everybody was upset about it for the most part, and it just left me with a bad taste, especially during that truck race. In addition with that, and also
it ruined the Cup race in a way as well, didn't it?
Quite a bit. It certainly derailed Chase Elliott from going, 5 in a row on the road courses?
Exactly. But I remember when we were discussing this when I worked in the sport. We were going to Watkins Glen. I mean, it's not going to rain in Sonoma, is it? We were going to Watkins Glen, and the forecast was for rain that weekend potentially. We were discussing this, and the crew chief said, "Well, what obviously you stop for rain tires under the regulations from NASCAR." So he says, "Well, you want to be the first car onto slicks, when it stops raining." He says, No. You want to be the first car onto slicks that keeps it on the road when it stops raining. You can be the first car on slicks, but if you stick it in the barriers, it's no use to anybody. So there is an art there, and there's a skill, and the driver, some of these drivers, especially the guys that have done a lot of the endurance racing, get a feel for the car and get an understanding for it, and let them use the skills they have. I think it really sort of neuters the sport, really, and takes away from some of the skills of the drivers there.
Yeah, unless you're Kimi Räikkönen, then you decide to prematurely go for wets when it never came out.
Well,
but anyway,
sometimes you got to throw it. Sometimes you got to, try and throw a double six, haven't you, and see what happens.
Yeah, for sure. I get ridiculed by a couple of my friends when I did that similar thing with the F1 game, and it rained like 20 minutes later.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it happens.
Yeah, but I think largely, I mean, if you want to give NASCAR a pass on this, largely racing in the rain is a very new concept to NASCAR compared to, say, Formula One or even IndyCar race. And these Formula One guys have it down to a science. They've been racing in the rain since 1950.
Yeah, they've even been tested like a quote unquote simulator rain at Barcelona.
Paul Ricard has a full wet weather system on the track, and if you're testing at Paul Ricard, you can just open the tap and soak the circuit in 20 minutes or something, and then do a full wet test. So
I mean, NASCAR, they'll get this figured out. The more road courses they add, and the more races in the rain they'll have. So, but anyway, so the truck race. So it was Ben Rhodes. Am I correct?
Yep, Ben Rhodes starts off the season 2-0. Only Mark Martin in 2006 and Johnny Sauter in 2013 have done it in the Truck Series. And as I was alluding to, the multiple overtime cautions, and just everything above was just a mess. I could have sworn NASCAR used to have local yellows at Watkins Glen and Sonoma, and all of a sudden it's just a lost art, apparently, local yellows. that they were very hesitant to throw yellows.
Yeah, oddly enough, you don't see local yellows in IndyCar as much as you used to either. They're so quick to go to the full course caution this day and age. And IndyCar as well as NASCAR. Yeah, I can't remember the last time I've seen a local yellow, but that used to be a thing.
Yeah, that's how I remember it. Like, I tell you this, if this happened in now, like Christian Fittipaldi, like a Sonoma in 2003, where he got lost, they probably would have thrown a yellow for it just to get Fittipaldi back where he needs to be. Back in 03, they just continued like nothing. Just Fittipaldi got lost.
Yeah, and they just laughed at him. So
I honestly thought it was Hideo Fukuyama, but for whatever reason, it was actually Christian Fittipaldi. It's like, wow, I don't know what 8-year-old me was thinking at the time. Actually, I was 9, but I could have swore it was a bad race for Fittipaldi. Well, then again, all of his Cup races were just that.
Yeah. So speaking of being 8 or 9, let's talk about Ty Gibbs. Who yes, I know he's 18. I know he's 18, but he sure looks young. But boy, this kid was I know there's the argument, we have the best equipment. To the point, NASCAR Xfinity cars are fairly, there's a fair bit of parity in there compared. It's not like he was in Lewis Hamilton's Mercedes against the Xfinity guys.
I'm sure he would have loved to drive that thing, considering he's a big F1 guy.
Yeah. So, but let's talk about this kid. And they've given him a very ambitious schedule for this year, a full season of ARCA, and now with this win at Daytona, he's looking at, I believe, picking up 14 more Xfinity starts over the year. Is that correct?
Yep, they gave him a heavy duty play. I'm surprised they would, because he was only going to run like a handful race. He's going to share the car with Ty Dillon and Denny Hamlin, Martin Truex Jr., and Kyle Busch. But now I think it basically almost fills up nearly the whole 54 car schedule by having Ty run essentially have a rookie campaign of his own. But I'm telling you this, I was thoroughly impressed. He had a pretty good showing in the ARCA race last August at the Daytona Road Course, but I wasn't expecting it to be that well put, well composed. Didn't put a single error. He had little to no errors at all. The only time he was hesitant, it was during the closing laps when he had to deal with Austin Cindric without a right front fender, because racing hard at stage 1 was, I guess, necessary. That Allmendinger and Cindric wrecked. Then poor Riley Hurst just had nowhere to go but to the grass and destroyed his car completely, big time. That's the difference.
That was a bit messy, and it seemed to me a bit unnecessary at the end of stage 1. But these guys are driving hard. So, but back to Ty Gibbs. So this kid started in shifter karts, correct?
I believe so. I know he drove some late model stuff a couple years ago, but it was not really until his once he went to ARCA, people are starting to notice what he's capable of, because the track record when there's a Gibbs family member driving these stock cars or truck, because JD used to drive in the truck series, and also Ty's father, Coy Gibbs, they had no success. They hardly had any success. The fact that Ty has able to turn that stigma around has been pretty impressive. Sure, he's hard on himself. That's the thing. He's hard on himself. He can be very blunt or very primitive and secretive, and not letting other people know his schedule or what his plans are until the moment is necessary. So that was my big concern. And I think there's a little bit of that with the extra schedule, but the fact that he stepped up to the plate, first ever NASCAR start, an Xfinity car, which many people say it has more demand, more of a free do what you can spirit compared to the Cup cars, where it's just only formulaic based on the package that they have, was really, really impressive. It honestly surprised me quite a lot that he didn't croak under pressure, because those young kids, sometimes they crack under pressure big time. Doesn't matter what division it is. You could look at a Jason Leffler or Andy Houston when they move up the Cup, or an Xfinity like Sean Case and JJ Ailey even. It's tough. And the fact
but I guess my point about the shifter carts was that these, all these shifter carts that these kids are running when they're as young as 5 years old are primarily, they're all road courses. You get a guy like Chase Elliott, who ran some shifter carts when he was very young, as opposed to somebody who ran something like bandoleros and quarter midgets and those sort of things. Kind of primes these guys for these road course races. And as we see, we're going a whole lot more road course heavy on the schedule. Mind you, we're still primarily ovals, but I think there's something to be said for that. That level of experience. I mean, this is exactly why guys that start in bandoleros and quarter midgets don't end up in IndyCar racing, but the guys that do end up in IndyCar racing are guys that are starting to shifter carts and Skip Barber and Formula V and those sort of things.
Yeah, for sure. It's just like with Ty, there's not really much. I'm not awfully familiar to what he's did much younger. I'm more used to what he's done the past 3 or 4 years at most. That's kind of what I was leading towards to, but yeah, I'd imagine if you're well equipped on those road courses through karting, it's obviously going to build up in the long run. Look at Kaz Grala and Austin Cindric. And for the longest of time, Cindric was viewed as the road guy before he started finally winning on these ovals the past year.
Well, Cindric needs to win in NASCAR if he's going to get to the Indy 500.
Yep, and man, he had that shot in the Daytona 500. He had the wrong car, but then he got shuffled out and got pretty much barbecued by the Penske drivers. Nowhere to go in the big one.
Yeah, speaking of Penske, they're just having a tough time. They seem to be, there's a lot of busted up sheet metal down there at the Penske shop.
Yeah, not just them, but also the Wood brothers. Their aligned member with Matt Benedetto. To where he's at the bottom of the points table after 2 rounds.
Ouch. And this is the guy everyone had high hopes for, Matt Benedetto. That was a lot of people are pegging him as the next first-time winner. Now we've had 2, and he still hasn't won his first race. But at the end of the day.
Give it time.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I like Benedetto. And
we got Vegas coming up.
We got Vegas coming up. Yeah, I like Benedetto, but, he's got to make some hay this year because he's essentially – unemployed at the end of the year, as Austin Cindric will hop into that ride, which is already predetermined. So, I mean, we're hoping the best for Matty there. So, Now speaking of young guys that started in shifter carts and were good on road courses, we're off to Homestead next week, where Santino Ferrucci, who's been pretty good in IndyCars the last couple of years, will make his Xfinity debut. Now, Louise, you followed this a little bit. What are your thoughts on Santino? I mean, I'm kind of hot and cold on the guy. There are things about the guy I really like. There's other things about him that rub me the wrong way. At the end of the day, I think he's got a lot of talent. How do you think he'll fare in Xfinity?
Putting the whole ordeal when he was trying to be a Formula One driver aside, when he had Michael Cannon, he really, really impressed in 2019. When he lost Michael Cannon as he went to Dixon and Ganassi, he wasn't that consistent to the point that Alex Palou actually was more outperform him out and just all around the board. Just the ovals is where Ferrucci tend to shine. And when he was talking to the press earlier Wednesday, he's very focused on polishing the ovals. That's why right now his schedule is oval loaded. He's doing the sims. But he's going in cold turkey because when he steps in that 26 Sam Hunt Racing Toyota, this is the first time he's ever going to step on an actual stock car, period. So it's going to be a huge learning curve for Santino. I'm curious to see if his driving style will suit him much better there, to where he don't have to necessarily worry about the hurting or harming people. And that's not been the case when he was, for the most part, in IndyCar. Sometimes then and there he'll have an incident or two, but he's kept it well composed, and that's why he was very excited to watch on those ovals, is like Indianapolis.
Yeah. No. He was a very clean driver in IndyCar. Yeah, there wasn't a whole lot of things that happened that were his fault or that he caused. Yeah, but my bigger concern, and Richard, you can probably chime in with this, that we've seen a lot of folks come over from IndyCar and from a full open wheel background getting into a stock car. That has, brakes that aren't quite as responsive. The car is heavier. The the car is wider. It doesn't go right. You have to muscle it more. It doesn't go exactly where you want it to. And we've seen very fine drivers like Dario Franchitti really struggle trying to get the feel of a stock car. But Santino's relatively young, compared to some of the other folks that tried to make the move there. So what do you see for young Santino?
I think it's going to be a struggle. As you say, I think there's I think a lot of the drivers that make the switch, they'll say that in IndyCar or an open wheel car in any series, you drive the car. A stock car drives you, and you've just got to guide it around the corners, basically. It'll be a different experience for him, of course it will, massively. And it'll be interesting to see how he gets on from dare we say, personality standpoint. I think he always strikes me. He's a young kid. He's obviously very confident, as you have to be, but he always comes across as if he's one of these guys that could fall out with himself in an elevator. He just seems to rub everybody up the wrong way, and hopefully he won't, because a lot of the times, stock car racers, they take these things one of two ways. They either really, enjoy and invite a open wheel racer or somebody from another series coming over to experience what they do, or they go the exact opposite way and make the guy's life a living hell by, making it really difficult for him. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, for sure. Now, Louise, am I corrected? I swear I read something that Connor Daly has a couple of Xfinity races on his slate as well this year.
I have not heard anything about Connor Daly on the Xfinity site, but I have heard he's going to run the truck series for Nice Sports again in Las Vegas coming up.
That's what it was, truck race, yeah.
Yeah, and speaking to add on to the Santino thing, I think doing the Chili Bowl and all those dirt sprint cars beforehand, I think may help him to some extent, because when you look at Homestead Miami Speedway, look at guys like Kyle Larson or Christopher Bell who are experts on those dirt racing, those sprint cars and midgets, how they've done real well in Homestead. I think maybe to some extent running those could help a little bit on Santino, but I don't think it's going to be the defining examples where, just because he ran this, he's going to be fine. No, of course, it's a different animal to what he's used to. I think it's going to take him some time. I think running the next 5 races in Xfinity and understanding the different tracks, because he's going to run like Martinsville, for example. I think running those different types of tracks is going to build him up and fully understand it. I think when I asked him why focus more on ovals than road courses, I think the way he explained it, he knows some of the challenges that will come up, like the different tracks, the different surface levels, and all that's like, if he's aware of if he has that awareness to what to expect or what he has in mind, I think he'll understand it and willing to adapt. Because he's still young, because when Franchitti came to NASCAR, or even Sam Hornish, they were right around there on age-wise, but they were so used to doing all the other stuff in open wheel for years upon years, especially in the top level of IndyCar, IRL, or kart, to when they jumped to NASCAR, it just proved to be difficult. But also, they only gave him a handful of lower-level starts before going to Cup. I think with Santino going to Xfinity, I think it's a very wise start to start small before thinking about big picture.
Yeah, so I have a theory about Franchitti, and it actually holds water if you think about it. That he was looking to get into NASCAR, number one, because he was living in the South at the time. Him and Ashley Judd had a home in Nashville. NASCAR there was much more money there, much more exposure there. And I think Chip Ganassi offering Dario a Cup ride was a way to go ahead and get him onto his IndyCar team, where he, went on to win 2 more Indy 500s and 3 more championships. Just saying. Just saying, Chip's evil plan worked pretty well.
Yeah,
and
at the expense of Dan Weldon, who ended up going to Panther because of it.
Yeah, but if you think about it, right? It's so Chip's a NASCAR thing, and he pulled him from the season early, for the whole the sponsor dropped their commitment. So Dario, we have nothing else for you. But if you want to drive my Indy car, you can do that, and
Yeah,
so I mean, if that was Chip's whole evil plan to begin with, man, it worked to perfection.
Oh, it did. It certainly did. Look at that. He won 2 more Indy 500s, a couple more championships, and Dan Weldon ended up with the raw deal. People forget that before Dario's career ended at Houston, he was the top IndyCar guy. It was not Scott Dixon. It was Dario Franchitti.
Dario became a legend in IndyCar racing, and a Hall of Famer. And his little NASCAR experiment is just a footnote. It's just a footnote now.
Yeah, it honestly is. And also didn't help that he got hurt at Talladega in the nationwide race when he got T-boned by Larry Gunselman.
Broke his ankle, didn't he, or something?
Yeah, when he got Gunselman in turn 1 or turn 3, whatever it was.
All right, so we're off to Homestead. Who do you guys like for Homestead? It's hard to go against like a guy like Harvick, but at the same time, this season is started off like no other with 2 first-time winners. So who do you like for Homestead, Louise?
I like Tyler Reddick's chances, but I also feel like Denny Hamlin is looking poised. Sure, he has a little side on him on Twitter, which has been kind of all the rage all week about his Twitter and how he's being sarcastic or legitimate, depending how you see it. But I think Hamlin will do well. I think sometimes something like that is probably going to build motivation, and when he does, I think he'll do well. But I feel like Tyler Reddick, if he remembers his 267 laps, not 266, I think he'll be up there in a battle. I think the RCR cars have shown progress. Sure, Reddick has not had the greatest start either, but coming to a track that he's had success, he darn sure had a great run in the Cup side pretty much the whole entire time. I feel like Tyler Reddick is favorable for this one more than Hamlin, but don't count him out either.
Okay, now Richard, what are your thoughts on Homestead?
I would go with somebody who's driven well there in the past. He's with a new team this year after less than memorable 2020. Kyle Larson.
Yeah, he did. Kyle Larson did have a great run.
Yeah, he's had 2 or 3 really good, strong races at Homestead, and it's a track that sort of suits his driving style. He can run that high line around the wall all day long, and I think he'll be good. And it's good for him in a way to get a track that he's confident at, early on in the season with Hendrick, so he can have that little bit of confidence going in there, rather than if it was the last race of the season.
Yeah, and I've got to say that the Penske guys have been knocking at the door these last couple of races, these last 2 races, and they just have everything go wrong. So I'll say maybe everything goes right for the Penske guys at Homestead, and then they can maybe get a little reset on their season, and Joey Logano wins this race. So, just a thought. I don't know. Joey's was pretty strong at Daytona.
He was leading. I mean, he was leading both races, pretty much going into at least 2 to go in both races, hasn't he?
Yeah, he sure was. So maybe it's they've got to kind of get that monkey off their back of getting close but no cigar. So, but anyway, speaking of guys going to IndyCar, IndyCar guys going to NASCAR, NASCAR guys going to IndyCar. Let's talk about Jimmie Johnson, who's getting ready to test down there at Barber this coming week. They unveiled the Carvana livery for the car. And Jimmie's very excited and ready to go. Yeah, there's a lot of people still, they're a little annoyed that he's not going to run the ovals, not going to run the 500. But do you feel like this is going to be a really uphill battle for 45-year-old Jimmie Johnson?
I'd say so. It's going to be quite a long undertaking task for him for this season. if he actually ends up getting a couple top tens, I say it'll be a successful year. I think I feel like it's a little bit unfair to say this, but I'll say it anyway. I think if he fares better than Ericsson and Palou, then I'd be thoroughly impressed. But if Palou and Ericsson outperforms Johnson dramatically, then it'll be a long year for Johnson. I feel like if they're equal, all three of them are if Johnson is equal with Ericsson and Palou, I say it's a strong start to his IndyCar career. If he's off the pace between those two guys, then it's a long year ahead.
Man, I'll just throw this out there that historically, Chip Ganassi Racing operates at their best level when they're a two-car team. You know, they've gone from two car, 3-car, 4-car, but the couple of years they were a 2-car team, or but it seemed like the team 3 and team 4 are afterthoughts. Other than the occasional, like 2013, Charlie Kimball was brilliant at Mid Ohio, but the rest of his duration with Chip Ganassi was some highs and lows, but only the one big high at Mid Ohio where he won the race. He had some good runs at Indy. So and I want to say the same thing for Team Penske this year, expanding to 4 cars. That they historically operate better as a 2 or 3-car team, and having the 4th car there is not necessarily conducive to. I mean, if you recall, when Pagenaud joined the team the first year, he had a miserable year. Came back the next year, won the championship, but that's neither here nor there. But I really, even though he's in a Ganassi car, there's a definite pecking order at Ganassi, and Dixon is at the top. It just remains to be seen who's 2, 3, and 4. Palou's in the 10, but he's a new guy, right? Mm-hmm. Ericsson's been there a couple of years. He's got a good relationship with the engineers. Maybe he could be the number 2. Well, Jimmie Johnson's bringing quite a bit of money to the team, and then you've got Tony Kanaan running the ovals. My bold prediction at the end of the year last year was that Tony Kanaan wins the Indy 500 in the Ganassi car and calls it a career, which is definitely possible. So, but anyway, so all this formula, or the Indy cars are running some tests. Sebring, they've had some testing. Romain Grosjean, who's the late of the Haas team in Formula One, is coming over to IndyCar again. Another guy who's not running the ovals, but he had some interesting comments about his first laps in IndyCar. And Louise, you can elaborate on this.
Yeah, it started a little rough for Grosjean at Barber on Tuesday, where he went off into the gravel. I know there was a tweet out there that he wanted to gravel days over, but no. It took about an hour, and they got that Dale Coyne Racing with Rick Ware Racing, number 51 Honda, back on track. And he pretty much alluded that how an IndyCar handles is vastly different than Formula One, naturally. Because he said an F1 car is more aerodynamic dependent, whereas the IndyCar, you could pretty much run your own line. It's not like sometimes with F1, you have to run at a certain lane to get the maximal lap that you want. But in IndyCar, he realized quick that you can try different lines and see what works for you. But also, there's a lot more to the car. Like, you can't really do certain things in any car compared to Formula One. And it's also much less speed, lot less power. That's something he had to get used to. But he had a real tight car, a real tight Honda, much of the session. So it was certainly a learning curve for him from a competitor standpoint, doing in his first official drive since what happened in Bahrain. I know he's going to go to Laguna Seca this next session, so we'll be curious to see how he navigates around there during the private session.
Yeah, and we can't forget that he's still nursing those third-degree burns on his hands.
Yeah,
I don't know if you've seen his hands, but they look they look pretty awful. So, but you got to give the guy his due for getting in there, still being relatively injured. With those burns on his hands, and as heavy as the steering is in there, just giving it his all. Now, Richard, what are your thoughts on Grosjean? You think he'll be pretty good in IndyCar? Mind you, he's not with the top team. But Coyne's, Dale Coyne has had moments of brilliance on and off for years.
Yeah, I think he'll do okay there. I think he's experienced enough now in any form of motorsport. He's professional enough. He's had a good grounding and a good base, base there, and I think he'll be competitive. I think he'll go there and he'll put up a good show, and I really do expect him to be challenging. Maybe to later in the season. Especially at somewhere like Coda that he knows. For not necessarily wins and podiums, but certainly, high top 10 finishes. And a lot of it depends on the tools that he's given. If he's given a competitive package and given the real support, then certainly there's an opportunity for him to do well there. But I think he's probably, in the last 20 years that I can think of, probably the most competent Formula One driver to come across at the right time in his career.
Since at least Emerson Fittipaldi to some extent.
What is Grosjean? 33? 30?
Yeah, he's going to be 35 this year.
Okay, so mid 30. So he's got, a good 4 or 5 years, maybe even longer at a competitive level in IndyCar world. And he's certainly not coming over as what shall I do for the next 5 years? Oh, I'll just go over there and earn a bit of a paycheck and do this and that. I don't think that's his mentality. And I really do, think that he'll make a good fist of it, and he'll be very, very competitive there.
Yeah, and that's
you could say the same thing about Ericsson. Came over at a pretty good time.
Ericsson didn't really. I mean, Ericsson was a strange driver in Formula One, wasn't
he?
But
he never had a good car at all. Honestly,
no.
This was before Alfa Romeo came along. But when Alfa Romeo came along, it was too late.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And Ericsson's done reasonably well, in IndyCar. I don't think you can knock him there, but I think Grosjean's got a little bit more about him. I really do. And it'll be interesting to see how he does there.
Yeah, he's shown it with those podiums at Lotus.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the guy's quick. There's certainly no hesitation about that. And I mean, it's not just the odd podium, it's multiple podiums, isn't it? I mean, I can't remember.
I think he had like 9 or
10. So, yeah, I mean, the guy, he can hold his own there. And he's pretty, from people that I know that have worked with him, he's pretty strong-headed and pretty opinionated. And if there's something he doesn't like, he'll tell you. And, hopefully he'll maintain that. And, I saw the photographs. He was talking there with Sebastian Bourdais, and it'll be good for him to have that, certain amount. And he'll know Ericsson. He may know Sato. They may have crossed over a little bit.
I think Sato was very little. No, actually, Sato was already gone when Grosjean made his debut with Renault in 2009.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, no, Sato did 2009 in Formula One.
So it was only until the Aguri Suzuki team went folded in 2008.
I'm trying to remember now.
Yeah, well, Sato's debut in IndyCar was 2010.
Yeah, I thought
so. They may have crossed.
Anyway,
paths
yes,
slightly.
Yeah, whatever it may be. But yes, certainly they have had some. There'll be people that he'll know, and there'll be engineers probably kicking around that have done a bit of both and the like. So it won't be completely alien to him. And again, a guy like that, he'll know he'll have a target on his back, as will, as you mentioned earlier, Jimmie Johnson and guys like that. They don't do this sort of thing on a whim. They have enough respect for the sport and the other competitors to go there and do it properly and professionally, and not turn up and go, I'm just going to, earn a bit of money for a few years now. They're going to do it properly.
Yeah, especially Johnson. He's pretty much financially set. He's just doing this as kind of the next chapter.
Well, I mean, as is Grosjean. I mean, in reality, we get these guys that need to,
Yeah, and also Scott McLaughlin. I'm not sure how much they make down there top level supercar driver, but I imagine they get paid pretty well up there, and also he's
Really
still in that,
confident, yeah.
and still in that age group, sort of with Grosjean, is still in his pinnacle.
Yeah, how old is McLaughlin? That's an interesting question, actually. I'm not.
I think he's pushing around late 20s or early.
Yeah, I thought he was
30s.
in his mid to late 20s. Yeah.
Yeah. He's relatively young, but he's certainly accomplished, and he's in a Penske car. So I mean, you've got to really look at him. And I read an article today where he was talking about being his own worst critic. But that's a good that's a good thing, though.
He's obviously
that's a good thing. That means
Oh,
that means he's putting in the work.
Yeah.
He's putting in the thing, and he seems to be very, very excited about the his IndyCar debut rookie season coming up. I know we had a one start last year, but this guy's going to be good, and the cars are totally different from what he's been running in Australian supercars, but he seemed to have taken to them very well. If you go all the way back to preseason testing before most of the 2020 year was canceled, he was pretty, put some pretty hot laps out there in preseason testing. So that's going to be another guy to watch. But I think the team to watch this year in IndyCar is going to be Arrow McLaren.
Mm-hmm.
I really think they've got. They showed great pace last year. We saw Award was third or fourth in the championship. Multiple podiums. The Askew got a podium as well, but you got Felix Rosenqvist in that team there, who's another very accomplished racer. I'm not sure who the team leaders are going to be. I'm not sure what the pecking order is there, but both those guys are dynamite, and they've announced another sponsor. They've got Views coming on board, which is another vapor product, but that's more money coming to the team. So this is a well-funded, very professional team. We know that McLaren has very professional facilities out there in the UK for testing and when they've got their own wind tunnel and aerodynamics. So these are going to be the guys to challenge the big three in IndyCar, and to the point of them challenging, Sam Schmidt Racing has always been right on that cusp. Like along with Ed Carpenter at the team to challenge the big three. So I really think that you're going to have to watch these McLaren guys this year.
Yeah, for sure. Another one I'll toss in is Rinus VeeKay as well. A lot of people have been putting him over big time, especially this offseason, that he could be one guy to totally watch that could probably be maybe battling for a top 5 point season. I wouldn't be too surprised if he can amount to that. Speaking of Ed Carpenter. But yeah, as far as Rosenqvist, I think this is the opportunity for him to say, okay, I'm going to a new team, a well-established team that could be much even stronger. It's time for me to shine, because when he was basically in many ways in the shadow of Dixon his entire time with Ganassi.
Anybody not named Franchitti that has driven for Chip Ganassi is in the shadow of Dixon. So,
even Dan Weldon was probably in the shadow of Dixon, even though Weldon won the championship before Dixon and the Indianapolis 500.
You just got to look at that 2008 season, how Dixon dominated week in and week out to say that Dan was second in the pecking order for sure.
Yeah, because when Weldon was with Ganassi, he tied with Hornish in the championship, but he lost out due to the number of wins.
Right, but to your point, Weldon did not win the championship before Dixon, because Dixon won his first championship in 2003.
Oh, you're right. Excuse me. Oh.
Yeah, Dixon won in 2003. And Weldon's first championship in 2005.
Indianapolis 500. Then, not scratch what I said about the championship. Excuse me.
Okay, there you go. That's that. This is quite true. And Dan still has one Indy win up on Dixon, because I kind of wonder if they talk about the Andretti curse. Mario Andretti drove the whole fine, great career with only that one Indy 500 win, and Dixon's kind of going down that road. He's just got that one Indy 500 win, and he's been close.
Terrible.
He's been close so many times. He's been close.
17 could have been a strong 500, but he got one up in that wreck. Then last year he just got outsmarted by Sato.
Got outsmarted by Sato. Yeah, I mean Sato. Sato is he can.
I'd be.
Sato's in the two timers club. He can walk by Dixon and say peasants.
I'd be devastated if I had only one Indy 500 win.
I know Richard. Yeah.
I'd be happy with one. But in fairness to my error, I was due for one. And again, I was due for one anyway, so it's all good.
It's all good. All right. So IndyCar kicks off in Barber. And was it still 2 months away or a month and a half away?
April 18th is the season opener at Barber on the Big Boy Network, NBC.
Yep. So we're still almost 2 months away. Now, Richard, Formula One teams are beginning their launches, which are always exciting. But for this year, the rules are pretty static. There's not a lot of changes. But if you want to go ahead and update us on some of the cars that have had their launches, and that'd be great.
Yeah. So 2021 was meant to be the new dawn in Formula One, new aero package, these radical cars that could run nose to tail at 200 miles an hour and, pass 10 times a lap and all this sort of stuff. With everything that's been going on in the last year or so that we're all aware of, the teams have pushed those new regulations back to 2022. So the 2021 cars are basically a B spec of the 2020 car, and to help create a slightly more level playing field, the FIA have introduced this token system and split up the car into numerous areas, if you like, and these tokens can be used on specific areas of the car to improve performance. So it could be suspension, it could be front wing, it could be rear wing, it could be diffuser, it could be engine, all of these sort of different sections of the car that teams can work on. So 90% of what you see on a car is going to be the same as what you had last year. And really to sort of pick out the differences, you have to have a pretty keen eye. Some of the cars we've seen so far, McLaren, for example, they've done quite a bit of work around the bargeboard area. Is quite noticeable. Red Bull have launched their car with a new front wing complex, if you like, as have AlphaTauri as well. They have a new front end of the car. And
did you say the front wing complex? That's hilarious.
That's what it's called.
I know. Well, if you look at some of them where they're stacked up, it looks like a high-rise apartment building.
Yeah. So you have, you'll have, your rear wing complex, and maybe that was just what some old boy used to call it when I worked there, and he was actually joking with me and trying to make me look like an idiot 10 years later on a podcast somewhere, but who knows?
I don't know. I don't know. I haven't heard that before, but I love it.
Yeah, it could be just an aerodynamicist term. In no way an aerodynamicist, so I probably don't have any right to use that. But so you're not going to see a huge difference. You watch the McLaren launch, and they spent longer with Lando Norris and Daniel Ricciardo making a song for the team than they did actually talking about the car itself. So it's not the same enthusiasm as a normal launch. There's a few tweaks that they've made to the car in terms of the regulations. They're about 10% down on aerodynamic grip. If you look, the rear of the car, it's a little bit in front of the rear wheels. There's a little bit less body work. It's more of like, the floor juts in before the rear wheels rather than goes all the way back to the front wheels. So there's little bits and pieces that they've changed, but it's nothing major from a, you'd normally see year on year. So you're not going to see a huge jump in the pecking order of the teams, really. I mean, Red Bull have said that they want to become more competitive on a wider variety of tracks rather than, very specific tracks, whereas Mercedes does seem to have that, wider bandwidth of performance there. So, minor changes. The bigger changes that you're going to see this year, we're still waiting to see, obviously, the launch of Aston Martin, some of the driver changes as well, which we really won't get to see until, the actual cars hit the track in Bahrain. But it's going to be an interesting year, really, and it's going to be a strange year. It's almost like a 2020 B season. But it's going to be good. And it's good to start seeing some of this, a little bit of normality coming back into it.
Yeah, I think with these presentations, as we mentioned earlier, is because it's so much different, so much weird because of the pandemic. We don't get all that flashy major events, Spice Girls introducing McLaren cars.
Yes.
No, that's it. But I think it'll be curious. I'm definitely curious to see how the Aston Martin looks like. Some people think it's going to look like a watermelon car. Who knows?
Yeah, well, they've still got the BWT sponsorship, which is where, the Racing Point and Force Indies have been pink for the last few years. So it'd be interesting to see how they integrate the pink, logos and corporate livery into a British Racing Green Aston Martin. But maybe Aston Martin are paying enough that they just have the BWT wording rather than the actual pink logo. Because, I'm no fashion guru, but pink and dark green is not a good combination in my book.
No, I don't think F1 is ready for a watermelon car, much like they were not ready to see a split sponsorship car in '99.
Oh, they were great. We loved those. Yeah.
Oh, I thought that was awesome. Yeah, the zipper car. Yeah. So, but guys, I do believe we are just about out of time. So, I want to thank you, Louise. I want to thank you, Richard. I want to thank the Hoobazoo Radio Network. I want to thank iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and Google Podcasts. I want to thank Keith Hayes for producing us tonight. So until next week, everybody have a good night. Watch the races. We'll talk to you soon. Good night.